So let's dive right into this explainer. You know that weird feeling when you catch yourself mindlessly scrolling on your phone and you suddenly wonder if your thoughts are even entirely your own anymore? Well, you're definitely not alone. I mean, think about your average morning. You wake up, you grab your phone, and within like 5 minutes, you've already seen an ad for magic shoes that'll fix your posture, some totally outrage-inducing post from a politician, and an influencer swearing that this one weird green powder is going to change your entire life. We're getting hit with dozens, sometimes hundreds of these highly targeted messages every single day. And they're all desperately trying to get us to feel a certain way, think a certain way, or just buy something right now. It gets totally overwhelming, and honestly, it's kind of scary when you realize just how effective they actually are. So today, we're going to unpack the hidden forces that are shaping our daily decisions. I'm going to give you the ultimate playbook for taking back control of your own mind. We're breaking this whole thing down into 5 key ideas. 1. Persuasion versus mind hacks. 2. Selling vibes, not specs. 3. The 2 brain tracks. 4. Sneaky stealth persuasion. And 5. The digital scroll trap. Let's get into it.
All right, idea number 1, persuasion versus mind hacks, giving your choice versus grabbing the steering wheel.
To kick things off, we absolutely have to talk about the massive fundamental difference between real ethical persuasion and just straight-up shady propaganda, because they are completely different beasts. Ethical persuasion? It actually respects your intelligence. It relies on real evidence and solid reasoning. The person is essentially saying, hey, here are the facts, here's my argument, now you decide. It ultimately leaves you with a totally free choice to say yes or no. But propaganda does the exact opposite. It doesn't want you to think at all. It just wants to hack your emotional steering wheel. It completely bypasses your logic, leaning heavily on fear, anger, and those super simple black and white answers. The whole goal of propaganda is to take over the wheel so you don't even realize you're being driven somewhere until you've already arrived. So how do you actually spot the difference out there in the real world? Well, there's this really cool quick BS detector you can use called the TARES test. Think of it as like a 5-second mental checklist whenever someone's trying to convince you of something. You just ask, is the message truthful? Is the speaker authentic, or do they kind of have a hidden agenda? Are they being respectful to you, or are they talking down and using fear? Is there equity? Like, is this a fair fight, or are they using some massive power imbalance to trick you? And finally, is it socially responsible? So let's say an influencer is hyping up a random crypto coin to a bunch of teenagers. Truthful? Probably not. Authentic? Nah, they were definitely paid. Equity? Nope, they have inside knowledge the audience doesn't. It completely fails the TARES test. And if a message fails, it's not treating you fairly. It's just trying to hack you.
Moving right along to number 2, selling vibes, not specs, how advertising got so sneaky.
Okay, if you think ads today are wild, you've got to see how we actually got here. Because back in the 1920s, advertising was super literal. They basically just sold specs and cold hard facts. Listerine is like the classic example. They practically invented the medical-sounding word halitosis, just to tell people, look, you have bad breath, your friends think you're gross, buy this mouthwash to fix it. Brutal, right? But it was strictly about what the liquid in the bottle actually did. Then World War II happens. Factories are building tanks and planes, so everyday goods are super rationed. Advertisers had to pivot to selling the future, that glowing American dream you'd get once the war ended. But the truly crazy shift happened right after the war. The economy is suddenly booming, factories switch back to consumer goods, and companies need us to buy literal mountain of stuff to keep the system going. To move that much product, they realized facts just weren't going to cut anymore. So they completely stopped selling what a product did and started selling how a product makes you feel. Suddenly, Coca-Cola isn't just sugary brown water, it's world peace. Chinette paper plates aren't just pressed cardboard, they're deep family love at a perfect backyard barbecue. So how on earth did they pull off this massive psychological shift? Well, advertisers basically started using Pavlov's dogs on all of us. You remember Pavlov, right? Rang a bell, fed the dogs. Eventually, the dogs drool just hearing the bell, even with no food. That's classical conditioning, and advertisers do the exact same thing to us today. They take a totally boring, neutral thing, like a generic car or a cup of coffee, and they constantly pair it with something that naturally causes a deep emotion. A gorgeous sunset, a heartwarming family moment, a really funny joke. And they do it over and over and over again. They aren't trying to logically prove their car is better, they're just wiring your brain so that when you see their little metal logo, you automatically feel the warmth of that happy moment. They're training us to drool at the bell. Which brings us perfectly to number 3, the 2 brain tracks, why we let the vibes decide. Okay, so if we know this is happening, why don't we just stop and go, hey, wait a second, that's literally just a paper plate. Psychologists explain this with something called the elaboration likelihood model, which is basically just a fancy way of saying your brain processes the world on two different tracks. First, you've got the central route. This is your slow, logical track. Think of it like a really meticulous accountant living in your head. It looks at evidence, it scrutinizes facts, and it does the heavy math. But then there's the peripheral route. This is the fast track. Think of this one like an impulsive teenager with a credit card. It's purely emotional and relies completely on surface-level shortcuts. It just cares if the speaker is really good looking, or if the background music is super dramatic, or if the person just sounds super confident. Let's look at how this plays out in real life with something like a timeshare pitch. Picture this. You're on a gorgeous vacation in Florida. Your logical central track, your inner accountant, knows timeshares are usually a terrible financial move. If someone just handed you a spreadsheet of the fees, your accountant would shred it instantly. But a good salesperson, let's call him Doug, knows this. Doug isn't talking to your accountant. He wants the impulsive teenager. So Doug gives you a massive smile. He hands you a fresh mimosa. He compliments your outfit. He talks about how much you deserve a luxury vacation. Doug is just flooding your peripheral route with amazing vibes. And if you let your guard down, your brain stays on that fast track, totally ignores the math, and lets the good vibes sign a 30-year contract you're definitely going to regret.
But here's the truly scary part about modern life. We almost always default to that fast track. Why? Because you're exhausted. We all are. Engaging that logical, central track actually burns serious calories. It takes real physical energy. And between early meetings, sitting in traffic, tackling 100 emails, and just drowning in this endless flood of daily content, our mental resources are completely shot. By the end of the day, your brain's accountant is passed out asleep. The teenager's driving the car. We literally just don't have the juice left to scrutinize arguments, so we take the shortcut. We just let the vibes decide.
All right, idea number 4. Sneaky stealth persuasion, stories and jokes as Trojan horses. So, since our brains are tired, lazy, and actively looking for shortcuts, what is the absolute best way to sneak a persuasive argument past our remaining mental security guards? It comes down to this concept called narrative transportation. Look, when someone aggressively throws facts at you, your guard immediately goes up, right? You instinctively look for the catch. But think about what happens when you binge watch a great show or read an amazing book. You know the dragons aren't real, but you still cry when one gets hurt. You get so completely sucked in that you connect with the characters and actually feel what they feel. Your emotional defenses just vanish. The story acts as the perfect Trojan horse, letting hidden arguments and deep beliefs slip right into your brain without you even raising a shield. And while stories are great, humor is arguably an even better Trojan horse. Take a look at this classic joke. Politicians and diapers have one thing in common. They should both be changed regularly and for the same reason. It's a funny joke. You probably grinned. But it's also a flawless example of forcing your brain to do the persuasive heavy lifting all by itself. Here's why that joke is literally a mind hack. It relies on something called the resource allocation hypothesis. Basically, to actually get the joke, your brain has to quickly build a bridge between two totally unrelated things, politicians and baby poop. Making that sudden mental connection takes a massive, surprising burst of cognitive energy. So by the time you piece the puzzle together and laugh, your brain has spent all its available processing power. You literally don't have the energy left to go, well, actually, a lot of civil servants do great work. You just accept the cynical premise entirely, purely because your brain is too tired from laughing to fight back. Finally, number 5, the digital scroll trap, the ultimate boss fight. We've talked about vibes, fast brain tracks, and Trojan horses. Now I want you to imagine taking all of those psychological tricks, putting them on steroids, automating them, and keeping them in your pocket all day long. Social media is basically a massive machine mathematically designed to hack your fast track. First, the physical act of fast scrolling means you have zero time for logic. You are trapped on the peripheral route. Second, it constantly taps into our deepest tribal identities. You see a post dunking on the other side, your brain goes, yes, my team wins, and you share it because it feels good, not because it's true. Third, the algorithms naturally reward pure outrage because anger is the stickiest emotion. It keeps you swiping. And finally, there are no gatekeepers. Anyone with a phone can completely bypass facts and inject highly manipulative content straight into millions of brains in an instant. Okay, I know that paints a pretty bleak picture, but here is the genuinely good news. The absolute best defense against this entire billion-dollar machine is surprisingly simple, and it's totally free. You just pause. Seriously, take a physical breath. When you feel that sudden surge of outrage from a headline, or that intense need to buy a sweater you literally didn't know existed 5 seconds ago, just stop. Do nothing for 10 seconds. By pausing, you break the emotional spell. You're forcing your brain to switch gears away from that impulsive teenager and giving your slow, logical accountant the time it needs to catch up and actually assess the situation. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on today. Given absolutely everything we just talked about, how our exhausted brains rely on shortcuts, how advertisers wire our emotions to paper plates, and how our feeds are perfectly designed to bypass our logic, how much of your worldview, your everyday desires, and your deepest beliefs is truly your own? Something to think about the next time you open an app. Thanks so much for hanging out for this explainer, and stay sharp out there.